Welcome to No Clip, the podcast that's like a book club for people who don't think that books reward them enough for being good at them. I'm Chad Rutherman.
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
And today, we're going to be talking about Shenmue, a game that was developed by Sega AM2 and published by Sega, released in 1999 on the Dreamcast. And then it was also released on the Xbox 360, mobile phones, Windows, Xbox One, and PS4. And then those ports were developed by Microsoft Game Studios for the Xbox, and I would presume the Xbox 360 version. And then the more recent, I believe they're like considered remastered ports, were developed by EaseNet and D3T.
But first, you give us a like or a rating, it would be greatly appreciated.
So Shenmue is, well, maybe after that we should speak on which versions of the games that we played, because I did play the original Dreamcast version.
Mm-hmm. I played the PlayStation 4 remaster via a PlayStation 5.
Right. So we will, there will be some, understand slight minor differences between our playthroughs, but I don't think it'll make that much of a difference, all things considered. Shenmue itself, though, is an open world adventure game, action adventure game. There is some action in the game for sure, in which you sort of, I hardly want to say that you solve a mystery, because the identity of your father's killer is pretty much revealed almost immediately. But it is like a revenge plot game that involves you gathering information and performing tasks in order to infiltrate a like underworld like group, like a Yakuza style group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very much like you do like detective work, basically. You're asking everybody questions and finding out information about where to find the killer.
Which, and much like in real life, if you just ask random people on the street about where to find a killer, most of them will just tell you to fuck off because they don't know where things are. Yeah. So, I don't want to get carpal tunnel. So I'm not offering a good job email to people who can correctly predict what part of this game I liked the least. But this game is it's so old now that playing it now feels so impressive in a way. And, like, it's so strange because we've been playing these older games more recently where I have had, like, great umbrage with something that felt like a relic of its time. But this game feels so far ahead of its time, but then just, like, spotted with these, like, weird it was 1999 things that would pop up. Because it isn't, this is, like, very much not a traditional action game in the way that games typically were in 1999.
Yeah. I don't know if a bell curve is the right way to visualize this, but like it feels like it was like very ahead of its time for when it came out. Then its time came, and then it felt like immediately way behind the times. Weirdly. Yeah, because playing it now does feel like impressive in a lot of ways, and like it feels like something if I had played it at the time I would really like. But yeah, playing it now, it's just like I think all of its flaws feel like really exacerbated in a way.
Yeah, that is a good way of putting it. So like, the game is technically speaking on a time limit. In that if you don't finish the game before like a certain date, you lose. But it's such like a comically long amount of time that like I doubt people would even know that was an element of the game. And it's like, it's things like that where it's just like, already we have this decision that feels so weirdly just like out, like, let's just put it in. And I felt like that is kind of like, they were like, oh, we're going to put in, because like it's Sega, they made like Virtua Fighter. There's like a Virtua Fighter poster in Fukusan's room. And like, they're like, well, we can just port in sort of the fighting game combat from Virtua Fighter. And that'll be like the game's combat system. It's like, you're not going to do a lot of fighting, but we are going to have that whole system in there. And they're like, well, we can do forklift driving and some motorcycle driving. It's like, so let's just put that in and like have you do that a whole bunch of times. Like, it felt like it was one of those things where they were throwing things at the wall to see what stuck, but they were using like balls of tape. Everything stuck to the wall when they threw it. And so they were like, well, we can't cut any of it. Just keep it all in. Make it 3 CDs. Nobody's going to complain about that.
Yeah, I think we talked about this sort of thing, but it was like in the context of an indie game, where it was like, oh,
was
felt
it
like
Wonder Song?
Maybe, but like it's like, oh, this game is like a narrative game, but it felt like it needed. Oh, it was probably Gemini Rue. Okay. But it's like it felt like it needed a combat system because it was like insecure about just being a narrative game. That's looking at like a more like things through a more modern lens. I think like with this game, it feels like they made this like we had this idea for this weird narrative game, and then they were like, well, we have to put all this like video gamey stuff in it because it's a video game. It feels like it's another way it feels very of its time. It's just like, well, it has to have this stuff in there too, or else no one will play it.
Right. It was the reason that it was ahead of its time is because it was so full of early 2000s forced variety, but it came out in 1999. It was even before the early 2000s. Yeah, no, and I agree. I think it does feel like there's like a lot of, and I'm torn on it as well because like the variety at hand enhances the weirdness of the game to a large degree. And I appreciate that. It maintains a consistent tone. Like, the only places where this game is, like, goofy and weird is largely due to the voice acting. And, like, other elements of production like that just, like, didn't sync up with my standards now compared to 1999. And so it felt kind of weird. But it's like all of these like weird little things that you have to do are like fucking putting phone numbers in and like watching the clock and making sure that you're in places at certain times. Like, I like that as sort of the basis of the game. And all of that works, but it's just slightly too much and always too often with different things, despite the fact that it manages to maintain like a setting and a tone really well. It does not maintain player attention that well.
Yeah, I think what it's going for, and I somehow don't think this phrase has come up yet, is like I think the game at its core is like trying to be a life sim. And I think all the stuff, the variety of things to do is to try to pull you into that. Like, I think the idea is like they give you a specific time in a place to be somewhere, or a specific time to be in a place. And then you're just like, it might be at the end of the day and you have fuck all to do. Cause that's the thing you need to do to progress and you don't have any more questions to ask people. So it's like, go to the arcade or like go, practice martial arts with Fukusan or whatever. Or like, it wants you to go and like kill time in a way that you would in real life.
Right.
But I just don't think it works super well. Like it failed to pull me in that way. Whereas like I did not want to go and play the arcade games again. I tried them all once and then that was enough. You know?
Yeah. As I don't really want to play darts. Sorry. Like, there's lots of stuff that is, yeah. It is, And I think a lot of it is the clock. I think the clock is such a double-edged sword because it does work well in terms of like every like day, in-game day as like a vertical slice of the game doesn't feel too short, doesn't feel too long. I think they hit the right amount of time that a day should take based on the average number of things that you do. But it's the days that aren't average where the clock becomes like a massive problem because you're like, okay, like fucking, what was the guy's name? Billy, the guy with the tattoo that you have to find before the end of disc 1.
Oh, probably. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's like you have to find him at the tattoo parlor. The tattoo parlor doesn't open until 7 o'clock, but you also can't get the information about who the fuck he is until 7 o'clock. And so you get the information, then you have to go to the next day, and then you have a day where you have 12 in-game hours with nothing to do. So you either practice, which, I don't know, maybe we could talk about later, I don't think was a good choice to be like the de facto thing that you should be using your time to do. Or, yeah, just wander the city, which you've already been doing, like, every day. That's the way that you get information. And so, yeah, the thing that I dislike the most about this game is that there are so many times when I just, like, put the controller down and walked away for, like, 40 minutes just to, like, let the clock go and wait for an event to trigger.
Yeah. And I think this is largely, like, because it came out in 1999. And was this ambitious, but like it felt like it could have like used more like better pacing, like if like because like at the beginning of the game, like you leave the house, you go down the street, you go to, I don't remember what the first little area you can go to is, but it's this other little street with a convenience store and a park, and then you go to the downtown area, and it feels like there's like a nice little progression there of going to new places and talking to new people. But then you hit that downtown city street, and that's what you're doing for like several days in a row, like if not like a couple in-game weeks of stuff there in that one place. And it's like if they kept introducing at least a couple more places so that like when you hit a point like that where you have like 12 hours to kill, maybe that can be spent exploring a new location, you know? Because yeah, it really stung for me, and this might be made worse just by personal taste, but like when we finally did get to go to a new area, and it's just a fucking dock with warehouses, that was like the most disappointing thing ever.
Yeah, that is a huge letdown. Like, It is such a boring, bad location. It's the third disc is like the most, which I don't know if it called out where the separations were for you in the new. Okay, so in the original Dreamcast game, disc 1 lasts up until you meet the guy at the tattoo parlor, and like you have like a fight or whatever. So disc 2 is then like pretty much everything else that you do in Debuita. And then the third, and then like the last thing that you do is you try and get a boat ticket to go to Hong Kong. And there's the fight with the guy who ends up being the final boss. I want to talk about this guy so bad, but I'll do it later. And then like you chase down the guy who works at the travel company. And then it ends, and then disc 3 is just all at the fucking dock. Like, the whole third disc is so... And it's so polarizing, too, because it's also the disc that has the most combat. But it's also the disc that forces you to drive a forklift for, like, 2.5 hours. So it's so weird, but it does emphasize like how disappointing that last area is, because you're set up like you're gonna go to Hong Kong,
right
right at the end of the second disc, and it's like put in the new disc, go to the dock, and just stay there for the rest of the game
and get a job.
Which I guess is very much, it is life simulation.
Mm-hmm.
You think you're going to go off on a grand experience, and then you end up just sort of working a 9 to 5.
Yeah, then you realize you need money to do that.
Oh, God. But I will say, I do really like those first two areas a lot, and I feel like if the game had focused on that, and... All right, I'm going to bust my thesis a little bit early here.
All right.
I think that the game's content is unbalanced in a way that makes the game worse than it should be, because I feel like I like all the individual parts of the game, but they're just spread out in weird ways. Like, you ever get like a burrito and you like bite into the burrito and just sour cream explodes everywhere, and you're like, well, I guess the rest of my burrito is going to be dry as fuck because they packed all the sour cream at the end of it. That's kind of how I feel about this game, where I felt like if they had if they had spread more of the combat throughout the game, it wouldn't feel like so weird to go back into it every time until the like end of the game where you're doing combat way more often. And like you really want to spend more time in those first two areas, because they are the ones that have all of the stuff in them.
Right.
The doc is not interesting. And so they end up like back-ending a lot of the action stuff and front-ending like all of the dialogue and talking to people stuff. And it creates this separation where the first drags on and starts to get boring, and then the last one feels like they tried to pack too many different things into it, and only half of it was interesting.
Right.
And so it ends up getting like, I don't know if they wanted to end on a strong note or something, but like it does feel like it doesn't have a smooth engagement curve at all.
Right. It does feel like they just had like the two different ideas, like the walk around and talk life sim game, and then the combat game, and they just didn't know how to like integrate them together very well.
Yeah, and it's like, and once again, this might have been different for you, but because like all of the different systems have used like completely different control profiles, it cannot mesh. Like, you can't be walking down the street and choose to punch a guy. Like,
right.
It has to be integrated immediately. Or it has to, like, be instigated separately from everything else. So it feels different, and the controls of this game are a criminal offense that I will be pressing charges for. It hurts so bad to use them. Because the Dreamcast only has one analog stick.
Right.
Extremely rough getting around, in my opinion. But like, I really liked some of the things that they did.
Right.
It's like when you're walking around, I love that like using the left stick to look around would let you like read signs and stuff, so you could quickly identify the things around you. It kept you from having to like angle the camera in weird ways in order to like look at signs, and then they would have to render all of the signs instead of just putting nameplates on stuff. But then when you want to use an item, you got to like go into first person mode and then like zoom way in and then open the inventory and then select the item and then back out of the menu a second time. And then you press A and then he'll use the item. And I was like, this couldn't have been streamlined at all. Like, not anything you could have thought of to do here. So it's a real like win some lose some with the way that the game is structured.
Oh yeah. Like in his room at the beginning of the game, you try to explore around that, like trying to like zoom in on like the desk and the dresser, and like it is all very like unintuitive, like how it all is supposed to work. And it's like, oh, let you figure it out. You're like, I can individually select different drawers. But it's like hard not to like, like zoom in past it, like the camera keeps moving and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Very cumbersome.
Yeah. It's extremely cumbersome and weird. And like the only time that you really have to interact with like inventory items is like when you're opening that one door and like
Right.
unlocking the box with the katana. It is, yeah, it's so awkward in like the minutia of it. Really anything small becomes awkward. Like if there's like a narrow alleyway, your character won't be able to run for some reason. Like you can't, like it won't let him run into a wall. Like he slows to a walk or just won't move at all sometimes. I don't know, it's a very
Like,
weird
when you go up
system.
upstairs, like it seems like he won't run, but if you hold in the button, he will do it. Like it's like, why is it programmed like that? Why not just let me run up the stairs?
Right, because the stairs are like their own, like different pathing. Like you have to get on stairs at like a perfect 90-degree angle. And I assume this is a technical limitation because they put so fucking much stuff on the disc. And so they had to like do something to like make it work. And that's why walking up the stairs to the dojo sometimes took me 40 in-game minutes. Which is like 10 seconds. Which is another observation I made, which is not a funny observation in most of the time, because it's like you're like, oh, the clock moves faster, so things that wouldn't take most people that long seem like it takes you a long time. If you compare it, it's like, haha. But for me, the thing that really cracked me up is that like when I was typing in the phone number, because I had to reference a photo that I took on my phone.
Right.
Because I didn't just memorize the phone number. It took Ryo like an hour to call the phone number. And it's just a bit of just a funny incompetency for him to have.
Yeah, I was really annoyed that the game did that. Like, made you reference the journal for the phone number and the passwords.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it just had not asked that of you at all up until that point.
Yeah, when you like pull up the phone and then realize that you can't then just open the journal, and so you had to back out of the phone and go to the journal, I was like, oh boy.
Yeah, spend a second
What other
hour,
number am I gonna call?
Spend a second hour putting the phone number back in after you fail the password thing.
The password, for me at least, was easier to remember than like a foreign phone number.
Right.
Like, this is just a sequence of like 10 numbers that I have to input. Like, I'm not going to remember that. But Father's Heaven, Mother's Earth, Comrades, 9 Dragons. I got it. I figured it out eventually. It got drilled into my head at this point. I'm not sure where to go from that.
I think we can backpedal a little bit. Like, one thing I was thinking about, like I said earlier on, is like, I feel like if I'd played this at the time, I would have really liked it. And like, I feel like we talked about this sort of thing before. It's like, this feels like a very much like a summer vacation game is what I want to call it. Like a kind of game that like you have to like live with, or at least I feel like that would be the most satisfying way to play it rather than trying to beat it in 2 weeks. Because yeah, like I think playing like it a bit a day, and like I don't know, yeah, I feel like more games were designed for that like pace of play back then, and I feel like this is just the game that's the most emblematic of that we've played.
Yeah, I think the fact that the game has so many built-in exit points, thanks to like the day cycle thing, makes it feel very natural to like play a day of the game and then turn it off and come back later. I agree with you though, especially with the notebook system, which I do like a lot. This kind of breaks the immersion of the simulation a little bit, but the fact that it leaves blanks if you miss like a piece of information, or like if you just get ahead of where the game thinks you're going to be, I think is a great way of sort of describing to the player, like, this is the path that you were on. Like, can you think of something that would be in between these two things? So if you want to go back and check that out, it gives you it's there's a lot of room for sort of like player interpretation, which once again I think goes both ways in this game, where I agree with you. I think it makes it a great summer vacation game.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it also makes it I'm a little upset that most problems only have one solution, because it feels like a very open game, but you do have to find very specific things.
Yeah, that's like one thing that's really stood out to me is like most of the gameplay is just asking people questions. Like it feels like it would be interesting to make it be more of a puzzle, or yeah, like as you say, like there'd be multiple ways to do things. Like it feels like it would be really satisfying in this game to like just like think like, oh, I could maybe ask, like make some kind of like connection that not everybody would. Like, oh, I could ask this guy about blank thing, and then it works, and it's like not like the intent, like the most obvious way to do it. Like that, I feel like that would be really satisfying in this kind of game. And like another thing that it's not directly related, but like it makes me think of is like you get rewarded for like exploring the house by finding the key. And I thought that was really cool because like it I think it fits in with that life sim of like really getting into like Ryo's shoes and like exploring his house and like getting to know the location that you're like living in each day. Like I think it's really cool that it rewards you for exploring the house like that. And it'd be nice if like more parts of the game could offer something like that, where you're like rewarded, or like, I don't know, yeah, more puzzle elements, more like secret things that you could find to be like rewarded for becoming familiar with the space.
Yeah, because the exploration as it exists in the game is very like checklisty. Like there are moves that you can learn by talking to people or buying the scrolls, but all of that is just kind of you walk into every location and check to see if there's anything of use to you.
Mm-hmm.
And while people have schedules and you'll have to find those people at certain times in order to get things, anything that you can buy is just like there at the same time every day. Like there's not really anything that's like super rewarding for your exploration, and it doesn't really feel like exploration as much as it does like a series of chores that you do. And I ended up not really engaging with that stuff very much, and I found that it didn't really impact my enjoyment all that much. It probably made me like it more that I was spending less time just sort of checking everywhere for everything. Like,
right.
But yeah, I agree. I think it would have been nice if they had been able to sort of open the game up a little bit more in that way. And like you could argue like that maybe that would have been too much, but I feel like the game is set up for it. Cause like every character, like named character, has something to say about like every part of the quest. Like you can stop by and talk to Tom at the hot dog stand about like every fucking thing that you're doing, and he will have a comment about it. Like
Right.
it feels like it would have been fairly simple to diversify the solutions to problems.
Yeah.
In that way.
Yeah, what was the name of the guy who had like the food, like, who was dancing by the food truck?
That's Tom.
That's Tom. Yeah. Like I was like, I feel like he was set up as like the kind of guy that would just like have his ear to the ground and would like know a bunch of people and would have like information about like a lot of things. And he has information about like the first thing you do, and then everything else. He's like, nah, I don't know anything about that, man. Like that like stood out to me so much that it felt like an intentional joke, and I hope it was.
I think near the end of the game, he can teach you a move. So that's something.
Mm-hmm.
That's like one other thing he does. I do think there is a bit of bloat. I think that it's one of those things that in 1999, 100% would have added to the game's mystique and made it more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really hold it against it, but like there are so many characters who have like stated explicit relationship with your character. Like you go way back beyond the events of the game. But yeah, it's very like, what do they say? Like it's like a mile wide but an inch deep. There's like a lot of characters that you will talk to and they'll be like, "Hey Ryo, how's it been? Haven't seen you, in like a couple of months or whatever." And he's like, I heard what happened to your father. It's a terrible thing, etc., etc." And you're like, "Anyway, yeah, do you know where I can buy a fucking light bulb?" And they'd be like, "Nope." "Don't ever talk to me again, asshole."
Yeah. No, that's beautifully put. It is exactly like that. Like 75% of the time.
Yeah. It's like, I feel like it's so close. And I do want to emphasize, like, I'm talking about this from, I played this game for the first time in 2025.
Right.
Like, I cannot hold that against it in terms of, like, it is just an older game and there were a lot of things that needed to be worked out before I can make this happen. But like, it does feel like right now I'm like, ooh, like if this, I now want to play the later Shenmue games because I want to know if they updated these systems at all.
Right. When you were playing, like, did you, like, the first time you hit a point where you needed to like wait for several hours, did you like Google how do I pass time, like? Because, like, I got to that point where I needed to wait to, like, like, probably, like, a 10 or 12-hour amount of time or whatever. And then I was like, there's got to be a way to pass time faster. Like, I guess I just have that much of, like, a modern brain that I was like, there's got to be the song A Double Time or, like, something.
But hey, wait, was the Song of Double Time in the original Majora's Mask?
I think
or is that
so.
only in the 3DS?
I think they added the Song of Reverse Double Time, I think, or something like that in the remake. Or something.
Yeah, that came out only a year later, right? Like
2 years, I think.
Well, who cares? 2 years, time is a flat circle. To answer your question, no, I did not immediately Google that, but also I knew from... I think I know. Right now, I could be wrong, actually. I'm pretty sure that I couldn't fast travel in the Dreamcast version of the game, but I know that there is fast traveling in the more recent versions of the game.
Yeah, when you leave the house in the morning, it asks you where you want to go, and it just takes you straight there.
Yeah, I did not have access to that. So knowing that was the case, I just assumed I couldn't pass time. Yeah, I just used that time to like cook dinner.
Yeah, assuming I didn't miss something, you have to still walk home. You can't fast travel back to the house.
Can't fast travel back. Bummer. That means that you missed talking to a guy about buying him a soda 3 times in a row.
They probably... Oh, I did encounter him at least twice.
Okay.
But you would miss out on the kitten side quest if you could just warp to and from the house every day. So that's probably why they didn't make it a all the time thing.
Right. What is the kitten side quest? Because I fed and named the cat, and that's
I don't
where
know if there's more to
me.
it than that, but I didn't beat the game. And I watched a walkthrough for the rest of the game, and there was like one of the timestamps just said "end of kitten side quest." I don't remember what it entailed.
Yeah, there's a ton of like weird scenes that will play, just like vignettes that happen, and like this is maybe my favorite part of the game, where you'll just be like walking down the street and suddenly some guy will show up and be like, "Hey, do this thing." Yeah, or like, "Hey, I'm gonna punch you now," and then you do like a quick time event or combat, or you like buy a guy a soda or a coffee or whatever. And so it's like there's I do really like these random events, but it did feel like I probably missed like half or more of them over the course of my playthrough, and I don't really know if that's like, if the intended like texture of a Shenmue playthrough is like, oh, which events did you choose to take with your limited time? You know, like, what did you find? Because I found like I had no idea where or when any of these things were going to happen. Like, they didn't feel like they were clued in to me. They would just happen at random, which I'm fine with. But like, there are conclusions to stories out there, I'm sure, that I never saw. Like, I helped that old lady find that house and then never saw her again. And I don't know if that was just a tutorial for looking at things, or if she has more narrative to her. I'll never know.
Right. Yeah, it does feel like it is just like you find what you find, and like each playthrough will be like that little bit different potentially. I think that's what they're going for. Yeah, because I agree. Like, it's not clued into, you know, you don't feel like you're choosing to do one thing over another. You just kind of stumble onto things sometimes.
Right. It's like the Sleep No More of video games.
Kinda, a little bit.
But yeah, I think, and that's all stuff that I genuinely really liked. Like, I enjoyed engaging with those little things. I especially liked when I would be in the middle of a quest where, like, what I was doing was just, like, asking everyone in town where something might be. Do you know where sailors hang out?
Right.
Please, God, tell me where the sailors hang out. And then, like, a guy shows up and is like, I'm going to kick your ass. And then you have, like, a little combat. I'm like, finally, something to, like, break up just asking everyone where sailors are. And so, I don't know. That stuff, like, I thought that was probably the master stroke as far as, like, making this game, like, a enjoyable experience. Because the unknown elements helped keep the gameplay feeling fresh, even when you were doing a lot of the same stuff over and over again.
Right.
Also, want to call out, speaking of doing the same stuff over and over again, goddamn How Long to Beat put this game at like 8 hours or something, which is a comedy. That's a farce. I know it was like pretty low.
I thought it said like 20 hours.
Okay, it's like 20 hours. That's cool. That makes more sense. I was like under the impression that the game like went by pretty quickly, and I was like, I can imagine somebody beating this game in like an hour and a half if they just knew where everything was.
I actually think speed runs are like 6 hours or something, because like you can't really like skip over time.
Right? Yeah, that's the big problem, I would say. But yeah, it definitely takes a long time of just sort of like the manual labor of figuring things out.
So
I don't know.
One thing that you mentioned earlier that I kind of wanted to talk about is the voice acting. I don't know if this existed in the original US release, but in the remasters anyway, you can switch the voice acting to Japanese.
That is a remaster exclusive. I read about that.
And I did that several hours into my playthrough, and just to see what it was like. But like, I feel like almost like that's the wrong move. Because I feel like the voice acting gives the game like a B movie like quality. Like, I think it adds to the charm of like what Shenmue is. But yeah, like so I guess if you want the game to feel less weird, the Japanese you could switch on the Japanese audio.
Yeah, the context that I read that in was like as a recommendation. They're like, unironically, this game's extremely good, so turn on the Japanese voice acting and like do this and that. And I'm playing the game and I'm like, I would never do that. Like, that is definitely part of the character of Shenmue to me, where I love walking into a house and having somebody just like seemingly they've just the American voice team just found anyone that they could find to do voices for stuff. There's a character later in the game who teaches you how to drive a forklift named Mark, who sounds so shy and timid. Like, I don't think that this guy had acted before.
Right.
And it was so funny, like, in the moment. And, like, in a way, sometimes it feels appropriate because the characters are not, like, big characters who would, like, act and emote in that kind of a way. But it's never delivered exceedingly well across the board. Like, it's not even like Ryo's voice actor is like much better than everyone else. Like, has a lot of the same problems as far as like enunciation and like the tempo and timbre of the voice. And so it's just a constant through the whole game that everyone is like a little bit monotonous and a little bit like they don't know what a comma means.
Right.
Like, how do I react when I see this mark?
Yeah. The Japanese audio does make the game seem so much more normal, which makes it extra weird when just fucking Gollum shows up.
Thank you. That was the weirdest fucking thing, because the game is so down to earth.
Right.
Like, you literally help old ladies across the street and, like, buy cans of soda out of a vending machine. And then you're having a conversation with a guy, and then the camera pans back, and it's just this fucking mutant guy.
Yeah,
who's like,
reveal.
Yeah. I'll bring him to Landy.
Yeah, that reveal really emphasizes it too. Like him just crouching over the rooftop.
Yeah. How did he get up there?
He spider crawled.
Apparently, yeah. God, it's so weird. And it gets... spoilers for Shenmue, 1999, by the way. It's so weird that he is the final boss of the game, also.
Right.
Because he is, like, the archetypical henchman guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's a weird, squirrely guy with, like, a deep reverie for his, like, fucking sensei, right? Like, he's all about the guy who killed your father. And he's, like, super weird, and, like, his character just seems to be that he's, like, a fucking possessed demon man.
And he's, like, wearing a pink suit. Or something.
Yeah, he's they refer to him as a skinhead all the time, so he's like a shaved head. And I'm like, man, like, this guy is not a final boss. Like, he shouldn't be a final boss. And then you fight him in the arcade.
Right.
And it's like kind of a hard fight, and it's like, but just kill him at that point. Or like have him run away. And get like a different, more intimidating guy.
Yeah, you get information from him, yeah. Or something.
So there's like this whole, like, he feels like a B plot that got promoted due to time constraints to me.
Yeah. Having not finished the game, I would have assumed, I wouldn't have been surprised if this game ended on, you don't find the guy who killed your dad, and you have to play Shenmue 2 to get the rest of the story. So yeah, something like that would have made more sense to do than make that guy the final boss.
Yeah. Well, because they have their cake and they eat it, except the cake that they chose to eat was not optimal because it was that guy as the final boss. But then he's just like, Landy has taken a boat to Hong Kong. He's already on his way there.
Right.
Shenmue 2 releasing next summer, whatever, you know?
Yeah. So I guess that is
so,
what
like, happened. Yeah, it is like sequel bait in that sense, where you then have to wait to play the second game to get the rest of it. But, like, I don't know. I just feel like there could have been... What was that game that we played? Oh, it was Wet. It was last year for Fanbruary. We talked about Wet. Had, like, that character who was like a ghost lady,
Right.
who you fight in a QuickTime event at the end of the game, and the final boss is like an old man with a gun. Like it's and it's like they wanted it to be like a lead in to some deeper story that they weren't able to include in the game.
Right.
But then you just never get it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think in this case, there are in fact 2 other Shenmue games that you could play.
Right.
But it is it does make this game feel like it ends on a bit of an anticlimax, especially considering how much forklift driving you just did leading up to it.
I think we've covered all of my notes other than like little nitpicks.
I have a few things. Literally, the first note that I took did not come up.
Lay it on me.
Actually, none of my notes came up. That's not true. Most of them are covered in one way or another, but I do have a couple of things I want to point out. We talked a lot about the mechanical parts of the game, and we talked about that one guy a lot. Mm-hmm. But I do actually love this game's cinematics and the like setup and everything that goes into it. It's very fucking classic kung fu movie. The opening sequence of Shenmue, I think, is like a masterpiece of video game cinematics. It's such a rad like scene where the 2 like martial arts masters fight against each other, and like he's like what did he say? I think I literally quoted it. Yeah, he's like, "Get up, I'll allow you to die like a warrior," and then he like fucking does the 5-point palm exploding heart technique or whatever on him. Mm-hmm. Like it's such a good sequence in the sort of like genre elements of it, and it really set the game up for me. I thought there was gonna be a lot more combat in this game, which based on that opening cutscene, even though I had heard that there wasn't very much combat in the game, the opening cutscene changed my mind, and then I played the actual game and realized there wasn't actually that much combat in it. But I was like all pumped up for a martial arts adventure from that. And, like, I like the relationship that you have with, like, Fuku-san and Ina-san, where they are, like, having they are sort of living in the house, and they have your best interests at heart in each of their own ways, and try and dissuade you from going on this revenge plot, and it leads to there being a lot of, like, melodrama. And I don't know, I was just into it. I thought there was a lot of cool character stuff. Apparently, there's a lot more to Kazumi's storyline that I just like didn't get because I guess I didn't get her phone number, which seems weird because she's like your girlfriend. But I just like didn't know. So I never talked to her. Really, right. I only had a few events with her. But there's a lot more to that. So there is like some interesting character stuff that happens in the game. And it's all done in a sort of very genre media kind of way that I do really like. Like Shenmue is a game that understands its tone and does a good job of like putting it into its writing.
Yeah.
So I do like that.
Yeah. The main story is all very well done. Yeah. And it wears his like inspirations on its sleeve like that for sure. It just definitely nails like what it's going for.
Yeah. And related to that, the other note that I feel like I absolutely have to bring up is that even playing the Dreamcast version of this game, I think this game looks great. Like, just really good. For how big the game is, I'm surprised that they were able to put as much detail. Like, people have, like, fucking veins on their hands and shit. Mm-hmm. Like, they're all very detailed models.
Yeah,
in a way I wasn't expecting.
What other video game people looked like in 1999. Yeah, like, this game is super impressive. And I think, like, that's part of the what makes this game, like, a classic that people still remember is, like, how good it looked coupled with that life sim, like how much it really feels like I've never been to Japan, but like it almost kind of feels like I now know because of Shenmue, like what a typical Japanese town is really like. Like it feels like this very realistic little pocket of a real world. Yeah, and the graphics definitely, I think, enhance that.
It's very much like it's an interesting counterpoint to hidden gem game that we talked about before, Ghostwire Tokyo, which is very tell don't show when it comes to its Japanese culture. It'll have things in it that are very distinctly related to Japan, but it's very happy to just like give you a wall of text about it. That's like, this is a common lunch item that people eat in Japan. And I'm like, I had to go through 3 menus for you to tell me that people like fucking onigiri or whatever. Like, I could have figured that out. Shenmue is very much like is more visually splendiferous in that area. Mm-hmm. You can like walk down the street and take in like sort of the signs and like people, like the fact that they have like sort of an open air market area is interesting. Like we know that the game specifically takes place in 1986,
right?
And there's an option to make the weather match the actual weather that happened in 1986, which is insanity. That's just cool. Like there's a lot of attention to detail here that ends up working out really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like you can tell like what types of people like go to the bars and like what like different types of people do with their free time. Yeah, it is very the opposite of Ghostwire Tokyo. It is very show don't tell. You just have to have that kind of open awareness to like pick up on that kind of stuff.
And it's why like the main gameplay loop of talking to people ends up working, especially in that summer vacation game style, if you are able to play it in that way, because you're spending so much time just going place to place and talking to different people. You end up sort of actually seeing more of the cities and more of like learning about what everything is and how it is. And as a side note to that, I also really like just like the design of the cities. I think is done in a way that is surprisingly player friendly, considering like one of the big problems with realism in games like this is that it's very easy to get lost because things just kind of blend together a lot of the time. The phone booths as like glowing like landmarks make a great visual sort of touchstone as to where you're trying to go. And then fucking Tomato Mart right in the dead center of Debuita has like the crossroads there, and it's like, okay, I know if I'm approaching from the U arcade, then I can make a left to get into the market area. And then there's like the alley that has all the bars and stuff. Like, it's easy to learn the town, which is really important when you're trying to essentially canvas for information. So I was really impressed by that. I like how frustrated I was on day one versus like 3 days later, how comfortable I was navigating the town.
Yeah. It almost kind of feels like how it feels to navigate like a college campus or something. It's kind of like a smaller thing than like a whole city. So you just get like a couple of streets that like kind of loop in on each other in a certain way, and it's like pretty easy to pick up on where things are.
And they're like weirdly themed around certain like activities. Yeah. I also like the detail that you'll notice if you, like me, stood outside of the door to the tattoo parlor for like 10 in-game hours. Like the lights will come on in buildings at different times. So like some happen at 5, a lot of them come on at 7, which is when the game like signals nightfall. So lots of little details like that, making good use of the fact that it has like a real-time cycle to the city.
Yeah, like the fact that everybody has routines. You know, everyone praises Majora's Mask for that. And yeah, this game did it first. Like it is cool that like what's her name, the old woman who lives in your house,
Ine-san,
Ine-san. Yeah. She has a little routine. She's always like doing something. If you go into the house, like you have to like track her down, like depending on like what time of day it is. Like, yeah, everybody, like, you can see people leave work and, like, go certain places, and, like, yeah, it is near, when things open, like, things are, like, staggered out to open at different times of the day. So, yeah, it is, and people, like, what's her name, your friend who said you didn't get her phone number?
Yeah, I've already lost it.
Yeah,
Kosume?
her. Yeah. She doesn't work at the flower shop on the weekend. Like, she's just not there, but she is during the week, and like little things like that are all really cool and impressive.
Yeah. I remember I was like, I looked up a map, was sort of my way of, that was like my primary concession to playing this game in 2025 versus playing it in 1999. I was like, I just need a visual to let me know where I need to, like, where things are. Because they'll be like, oh, yeah, go to the antique store. And I'm like, I'm not checking every building again. I'm sorry. So I, like, just looked it up. I was like, give me a visual map and, like, with labels. And so one of the things I noted that it was like, the bus stop was marked, and it was like, buses don't show up on holidays. And I was like, oh, it like recognizes holidays in the game, but like, I don't know what holidays there are, because I beat the game by like the 18th or whatever of December. So like, I didn't run into any. But it is like, it's crazy, like how integrated the scheduling is to everything, from the time of day to even what day it is and how the weather is outside, which I always liked when it snowed.
Yeah.
It just looked nice in the snow.
Yeah, I like that it's set in the wintertime. Yeah, and I also like that, like, that your house is like up at the top of a hill. Because, like, that is one thing you see in, like, Japanese movies and, like, TV shows is, like, every fucking town's built into the side of a mountain, And I think it's cool how it, the game reflects that. Like, the town, like, goes down, and then once you reach the bottom is, like, where the city is. There's something about it just feels like... You can just, like, tell it's inspired by, like, a real-world place.
Yes. Yeah, and also, I mean, it also leads into that good just level design generally. Like, it makes it easy to find your way back.
Yeah, you just go up.
Because it's always got to go uphill, yeah. So, yeah, it feels good, the way that they put the world together. I was very impressed by it. But I do think that now covers all of my notes. At long last. I haven't played. Here's a little tidbit that maybe would be an interesting discussion to end on. Maybe it's kind of a short one, but I haven't played any other Shenmue games. And I also haven't played the Yakuza games, which I know people are, they're also Sega produced games. I think there's like some personnel crossover between the two.
It would make sense.
And I know that people, like compare the two a lot because they're both games that are open world and give you like a lot of options as far as like what you're doing in them. I don't know if any future games in the series are explicitly magical. But the plot of this game does focus on like this dude wanting to get the dragon mirror and the phoenix mirror. And when the dragon ascends and the phoenix descends, they will find a portal to heaven and hell or something. And with the exception of the final boss of the game, whose name I think is Chai, which is just the word T. I don't understand. Who seems like he seems like a fantastical character compared to everyone else. This game is very grounded, very down to earth. Do you think that, and like this is a fun trivia question because people know the answer to this already because there's 3 games. Do we think that like future Shenmue games have like actual like superpowers or like mystical arts? I kind of think maybe.
Yeah, because to me it feels a lot like something like Indiana Jones or like where it's mostly like a regular ass real world, but there's these like mythical things that lie like just on the periphery of humankind, you know. We never quite fully come in contact with them. Sort of vibe. But yeah, like I feel like there's got to be that kind of spectacle creep, right? Where like by
I guess that makes sense,
by the third one, it's just Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, you know. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
I do also know that like Shenmue 2 is the fan favorite, I believe. So maybe one day we'll see. All right. Do we have Fukusan thoughts?
My Fukusan thoughts. Yeah, so I guess the best way to put it is like, yeah, like I feel like this game is very, like, even though I did not have a Dreamcast, it feels very nostalgic, I think, as I was trying to get at early in the episode. Like, it feels like the kind of game that you would have played over the summer, like the kind of game you would have gotten and chipped away at and like played it bit by bit, and you would kind of live with it for a couple months. Especially when you couldn't like look stuff up easily. And yeah, and I feel like if I would have played it at the time, it would have been really cool and impressive to me. And I would have been one of those people who thinks of it as like this cool classic. Because yeah, I think that it came out in an era where that kind of interesting technology and gimmicks and things like went a really long way. Like it was really this. I'm sure this game felt very exciting to play in 1999. Even when the gameplay wasn't always exciting. But yeah, like coming to it now with a modern lens, it yeah, I think I said this early on, and I think it just kind of sums it up. Like I feel like time has really exacerbated all the game's issues. And they stand out like sore thumbs playing it now. There's a lot of inconveniences in there. Yeah, like having to like wait around, having to like it I feel like it doesn't quite engage you like in the way that it wants to. Like it doesn't quite pull you into that daily routine and get you to want to like play the arcade games and practice karate in your downtime, you know? Like it just doesn't quite click together. But I think it is interesting and still completely possible to appreciate playing it now. So it is an interesting little game if it seems at all interesting to you. Like it's worth a look, I think.
Yeah. I personally was surprised at how much I enjoyed the game. Looking back, I do think we kind of honed in on the same issue, which is that playing it now, the game just feels very, very slow. There's too much waiting. There's too little to do that feels like it's actually making you any kind of progress or is even like that fun to do more than once. So the big stumbling block with this is that you have to like just go in with the understanding that there's a lot of downtime, and not downtime in the way that a game like Death Stranding has downtime. It's downtime in a way where you are truly doing nothing. And you can opt to try and like really squeeze other things out of your playthrough. But in the end, I feel like it isn't going to enhance your enjoyment of it all that much. That being said, I do really like the story, like the way that the main plot of the game pans out. I think that there's a lot of really cool character moments, and the dialogue gives its own sort of texture to the game that is very funny in a way, but also like charming. It feels like kind of the best parts of the limitations of old games are all here because everything is here. They just put everything that could be in games in the game at the time. And there's something really interesting about that. So I had fun with it. It's not like my favorite game from this era by any means. But it is like a very cool slice that you don't see. You didn't really see emulated for like many years. Now there are lots of games that do similar things to this. But you'll note that a lot of those games, like the Persona series, reverse that, where like the main gameplay loop is much more action oriented, and then the downtime stuff is a more minor part of the experience. So if you want to see the opposite of that, if you want to just see like one of the early games that inspired a lot of more slice of lifestyle games, I think this is a great one to go back to. Just understand that it's going to be a slow, methodical process, and one that you have to really like want to sort of smell the roses to really get into.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for listening to No Clip this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, for our last fan-submitted game, we are going to be talking about Wanted Dead, which is... I don't know, it seems like the theme of this year was games that are considered classics or games that are considered not good. Sort of going back and forth on it. It is a third-person action, like, shooter / sword combat game, and I've already played, like, a good amount of it, so we'll get into why that is a sort of core design element of it on the episode. But it is a genre mashup, but in like a microcosm where it's like we're mashing up the kinds of third-person action games there are. So that'll be interesting to jump to. Until that time, hell yeah, you can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com or on splattershot.pro, which recently in the Discord we've been assured clears. There you can find links to our email address, our Twitter account, our YouTube channel, where we post all of our episodes, as well as playlists of different genres of games and different themes on occasion. And you can listen to all of our old episodes, including ones that we did on Persona 5, on we are not fighting game people. This game has fighting game combat. Mm-hmm. We talked about Super Smash Brothers Ultimate. That's pretty far away from Shenmue.
Yeah. I don't know. My mind went to like a short hike and Night in the Woods, Life is Strange. My mind went to all the narrative games.
Right. Wander Song, another game that had too many mechanics in it. Fucking ask everyone in town where the like button is
in the comment section.
Find somebody who can speak Chinese to translate the comment section.
Crawl up a building like a spider monkey and ring that bell. So what's up with these memes?